Welcome to Lund, and welcome to Lund University School of Economics and Management. My name is Mats Benner, and I'm the Dean of the school. And it's my pleasure to open up the second awarding of the Jan Söderberg Family Prize in Economics and Management. The prize is given to a notable younger scholar in the areas of economics and management, who made a significant contribution to our understanding of the world and how it functions. This year's prize winner is Professor Nathan Nunn of Harvard University, and you will get a thorough presentation of Professor Nunn's work by my esteemed colleague, Professor Ellen Hillbom, soon. And of course, the opportunity to listen to Nathan Nunn personally. A business school like this one is nothing without its friends and benefactors. And the Jan Söderberg family has been a consistent friend and supporter of the school throughout the years. And it makes me profoundly proud and happy that we have this prize and that we commemorate and notice the renewal of economics and management via it. It is therefore my privilege to give the word to Jan Söderberg and Åsa Söderberg to tell their story and how they are connected to and aligned with the prize. Welcome, Jan. Welcome, Åsa.
Hi, and welcome to the second year ceremony of Jan Söderberg's Family Prize. And as you might have figured out, we are Jan and Åsa Söderberg. Due to the situation of COVID-19, we are 1 year late to hand over the prize to Harvard Professor Nathan Nunn, one of the most eminent economic historians. We have for this event taken advantage of the latest technique, so the lecture of 2020 year's prize winner will soon take place. So why this prize, you might ask? Our belief is that academic research and the results of hard facts is the base of development, understanding and self-insight. Furthermore, we find that skilled researchers tend to get recognition in the later phase of their careers, which is why the prize is aimed to support and boost those researchers who are under the age of 50. The philosopher Santayana once wrote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." A quote that's topical to keep in mind, especially given the current trends. How can we discuss the future if we don't know our history, if we don't have understanding of the evolution? We are yet again very pleased to announce that 2020 year's prize goes to Professor Nathan Nunn, and his lecture to come is named The Importance of History for Economic Development. His finding and research will hopefully give us all an eye-opener, regardless of what our everyday occupation is.
Following the lecture, it will be, what we hope, a most interesting panel discussion about leadership. Looking locally, national, as well as global, it becomes obvious that leadership is an important question to focus on. We need to have more knowledge and understanding in order to create tools to manage and improve leadership in the society, in the business world, as well as in all organizations. Economic development and leadership are two realities closely linked together. Lund School of Economics and Management is ranked among the world's best for their education, research, and corporate contacts, and it's accredited by leading organizations. We are proud and grateful to the school that they are hosting our prize and the following panel discussion today. And so, now it's time for the well thought of Ellen Hillbom, professor in economic history here in Lund, to give a closer introduction to Nathan Nunn and his work. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan and Åsa. I nominated Professor Nathan Nunn because all of us who are interested in understanding why certain countries and groups of people in the world have become wealthy while others have stayed poor should study history. Professor Nunn's research showed that history matters, although not all dimensions of history matter equally much. Both empirically and theoretically, we should strive to learn more about the factors that drive persistence and change. While some scholars claim that success and failure is primarily the outcome of access to natural resources or human capital, others argue that our capacity to regulate economic, political, and social interactions matter more. I would say that it is a combination of these things, and which factor is most pronounced differ over time and space. For more than a decade, Professor Nunn has become increasingly internationally renowned for his development of advanced quantitative methods to study the challenges and processes through which the past influence present developments. He has inspired scholars within the field of economics to acknowledge the role of history and to search for innovative solutions to methodological challenges, including problematic data. Personally, I work within the subfield of African economic history. This is a research area that has received growing attention globally over the last decade, and the work of Professor Nunn has been an important part of the increasing recognition of the field. In one of his most cited studies, he argues that a substantial part of Africa's current underdevelopment appears to be caused by the long-term effects of the Atlantic and Arabic slave trades. He has specifically published findings on how current differences in trust levels within Africa can be attributed to the impact of the historical slave trades, which have caused the emergence of low-trust cultural norms, beliefs, and values in ethnic groups heavily affected by slavery. Professor Nunn has, within his broader scope of research, continued to study the political economy of Africa. Of late, he has in his research addressed numerous aspects, such as the causes and consequences of violent conflict, the motives and effects of foreign aid, the impact of climate change, the trajectories of agricultural production, and cultural persistence and change. A core theme in his research on Africa, as well as on other regions in the world, is highlighting the role of history and focusing on long-term perspectives. Now, I am happy to proclaim Professor Nathan Nunn the recipient of the 2020 Jan Söderberg Family Prize in Economics and Management. And with that, Nathan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ellen, and thanks to all of you at Lund University School of Economics and Management. Thank you so much. I would love to be in Sweden right now and meeting all of you, but the world is the way it is. Means that unfortunately I'm having to record this video from my home in the United States. So given this, I'd like to take the chance to tell you a little bit about my research. So the research I do looks at the historical origins of the vast differences in wealth and inequality that we see around the world today. One of the first things that I examined was the impact of the slave trade, which was this large trade in individuals from Africa to the Americas and other parts of the world from roughly 1500 to 1900. So during this time, upwards of 20 million individuals were enslaved and taken from the continent. So my research, which was quantitative, sought to quantify or measure the number of individuals taken from each region in Africa and to correlate this with economic prosperity today. Okay. So consistent with the slave trade having a detrimental effect on subsequent economic development, what I found was the areas of Africa that had the most individuals taken through slave capture, raids, and all other forms of enslavement, those areas are actually the poorest areas of the continent today. Okay. So this is consistent with this historical event having a detrimental effect on economic prosperity and a detrimental effect that persists until today. Subsequent research that I've looked at has tried to understand and trace the exact channels through which historical events affect outcomes today. And a lot of my research has focused on things like culture, norms, values, beliefs, and the role that those play in transmitting the effects of historical events until today. And part of that is understanding how historical factors affect the evolution of these traits, for example, cultural traits. One of the factors I've looked at, along with Paolo Giuliano and Alberto Alazina, is the impact of traditional agricultural practices on gender roles today. And so what we do is we test a hypothesis which comes much before us, which was developed by Esther Boserup. And the hypothesis is that places that have plow agriculture rather than hoe agriculture will in the past have had men that primarily participate in agriculture. And this is because the plow, which is this large implement or instrument, requires upper body strength. And that was particularly well suited for men on average. So it doesn't mean that women could not have used the plow or could not have undertaken the hard work, but because of a slight advantage due to biological reasons, then men tended to participate in agriculture more in those societies. So plow agriculture can be contrasted to hoe agriculture, where the implement used is a handheld hoe, and what you find historically is women participated as much as men in agriculture in hoe societies. Okay? So the hypothesis and what we test and find evidence for is that in societies that traditionally had plow agriculture, men tended to specialize in work outside the home, women in work within the home, and that generated a norm about the roles of women and the roles of men in society, and a norm or a belief that the roles are unequal. Okay? So in the analysis, we then trace these effects until today and look at things like female labor force participation, female participation in firms, female participation in politics, and find evidence that they were affected by the traditional agricultural technologies, namely whether a plow was used or not, in pre-industrial societies. So even after the society has moved out of agriculture, we find that these norms persist and have a very large impact on these aspects of gender equality. So the very last, or the third set of findings that my research can fall within have to do with, the question about what are the consequences of these different cultural traits that exist and that we've documented, and that by and large are historically determined. So we've looked at a number of different traits, but one of the traits which I'll talk about is the practice of bride price. And so this is a payment from the husband or the husband's family to the wife's family at the time of marriage. Okay, so this is a practice that tends to be present in patrilineal societies. It's present in much of Africa, parts of Southeast Asia, and parts of Asia as well. And so what we do is in this study is look at or ask what are the consequences of a bride price for women's education. Okay. And in particular, what are the consequences of bride price for the efficacy of school construction in terms of educating girls? So we look at this within Zambia, which has some groups that practice bride price and others that don't. We also look at this within Indonesia, which also has some groups that practice bride price and some groups that do not. And so what we find when we look at the data, in both countries, they had very large school construction programs. And in both countries, what we find is whether the construction of elementary schools caused an increase in girls' education, this depended critically on whether the bride price was practiced. in among societies where the bride price was practiced, that is, a payment is made from the husband or the husband's family to the family of the bride at the time of marriage, then we found that education resulted in greater girls, or school construction resulted in more girls' education. Okay, and we dig deeper and think about, well, why is this? Why does this one cultural trait, which really doesn't have to do with education, why is it that it had such an important impact on the efficacy of school construction programs? Okay, and what we show is the bride price responds to educational investments. Okay, so in other words, if a bride or a girl has completed more education, the bride price that her parents will get at the time of marriage is much higher. We find it's about 100% higher. Once they graduate from elementary school, it doubles again once they graduate from high school. Okay, so the parents understand this, and from focus groups we find that, or we find evidence that parents do understand this, that if they educate their daughters, then the bride price that they'll receive when the daughters get married is going to be 100% higher, right? And so in those societies, when a school is constructed nearby, then they're quicker to send their daughters to school than in societies that don't have the bride price. Okay, so this is just one example how this one particular cultural trait affects policy and also affects the efficacy of policy, right? And so, so I think it's important to understand those. And as my other research shows, these cultural traits, by and large, are historically determined through evolutionary forces. So that's kind of how all my research fits in, and some is a taste of the research for which the prize was chosen. So once again, I'm very grateful for everyone at Lund University. And I'm very grateful to have been chosen for the prize, and very humbled and honored. And so thank you very much.